The city pulsed with restless energy as Ethan weaved through the bustling streets. His thoughts tangled in the frustrations of another long day at the newsroom. The air carried the distant hum of traffic, the occasional honk, and the chatter of pedestrians wrapped in their own hurried lives. Ethan adjusted the strap of his messenger bag, sighing. Deadlines, late hours, and an empty apartment. His life had become a predictable cycle. Then, in the span of a heartbeat, everything changed. A sharp turn around a dimly lit corner sent him colliding into a solid, unyielding force. His breath hitched as a firm grip caught his arm, steadying him before he could stumble backward. The scent of leather and crisp cologne filled his senses, grounding him in the moment. When he looked up, his pulse quickened. The man before him was tall, broad-shouldered, and clad in the unmistakable dark uniform of a police officer. His sharp blue eyes assessed Ethan with a mix of surprise and mild amusement. A leather holster strapped to his waist brushed against Ethan's side, the weight of it a stark reminder of authority and control. "You all right there?" The officer's voice was deep, steady, with a trace of humor. Ethan swallowed, willing himself to ignore the warmth spreading through his chest. "Yeah, guess I should watch where I'm going." The officer smirked, adjusting the strap of his vest. "Or maybe I should stop standing in the way of distracted pedestrians." A flicker of something unspoken passed between them, an almost imperceptible pause before Ethan cleared his throat. He hadn't realized he was staring. The officer extended a gloved hand. "Damien." Ethan hesitated before accepting the handshake, the brief contact sending an unexpected jolt through him. "Ethan, late night?" Damien asked, gesturing toward the worn-out press badge still clipped to Ethan's bag. "Something like that," Ethan admitted. "You?" "Night patrol. City never sleeps." Damien glanced at his watch, then back at Ethan. "And neither do you, apparently." Ethan chuckled, the tension easing slightly. "Journalism's a jealous mistress. Tell me about it." Damien's expression softened. "Law enforcement isn't much better." A gust of wind swept through the street, carrying the distant wail of a siren. Ethan shivered involuntarily. Damien noticed. "Need a ride home?" he offered, nodding toward the parked squad car at the curb. Ethan hesitated. Was this a bad idea? A cop? A stranger? A quiet invitation wrapped in the guise of professional courtesy? But something about Damien, his steady presence, his quiet confidence, made Ethan nod. "Yeah," he said, voice steady. "That'd be nice." As Damien opened the passenger door, Ethan slid in, the cool leather seat against his back, the faint crackle of the police radio humming in the background. For the first time in a long while, the night felt unpredictable. And as Damien drove through the neon-lit streets, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that fate had just rewritten his story. The first ride home turned into many. At first, their encounters were fleeting, Damien stopping by the coffee shop near Ethan's office, exchanging quick nods and dry humor before disappearing back into the city's chaos. But over time, small moments unraveled into something deeper. A shared meal after a long shift, a midnight walk through quiet streets, conversations that started with casual remarks but drifted into vulnerabilities neither had expected to share. Ethan found himself drawn to Damien's quiet strength. Beneath the uniform, there was a man who carried the weight of the world, who spoke of duty with conviction yet hinted at a loneliness that mirrored Ethan's own. And Damien, he seemed just as captivated, watching Ethan with an intensity that made the air between them feel charged, electric. One evening, they found themselves by the river, city lights flickering on the water's surface like scattered stars. Ethan leaned against the railing, the cool metal biting through his sleeves, while Damien stood beside him, arms crossed, gaze fixed on the horizon. "You ever think about leaving?" Ethan asked, breaking the silence. Damien exhaled slowly. "Leaving what?" "The job, the city, the expectations." A muscle in Damien's jaw tensed. "Sometimes. But running doesn't fix things. Ethan studied him. And staying? Damien turned to face him then, blue eyes unreadable. Staying means fighting. Even when it's hard. Something in his voice made Ethan's chest tighten. He wanted to ask what battle Damien was fighting, what weight pressed on his shoulders when the badge came off. But he hesitated, afraid of what the answer might be. Instead, he reached out, fingers brushing against Damien's wrist in a tentative gesture. For a moment, Damien didn't move. Then, slowly, he covered Ethan's hand with his own, his touch warm, grounding. Ethan swallowed hard, the moment stretching between them, fragile yet undeniable. "You're different," Damien murmured. Ethan huffed a quiet laugh. "Not sure if that's a compliment." "It is." Damien's grip tightened briefly before he pulled away, shoving his hands into his pockets. "It's just complicated." Ethan frowned. "Damien." The sudden chime of Damien's phone shattered the moment. He stiffened, glancing at the screen before muting the call and slipping the device back into his pocket. "Everything okay?" Ethan asked, noting the flicker of tension in Damien's expression. "Yeah," Damien said, too quickly. "Work stuff." But Ethan wasn't convinced. He recognized the look, the guarded distance, the unspoken hesitation. A whisper of doubt curled in his chest, but he pushed it away. "Come on," Damien said, offering a small smile. "Let's get out of here." Ethan nodded, but as they walked side by side, the warmth of Damien's touch still lingering on his skin, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was slipping through his fingers. The first red flag was subtle, a missed call Damien refused to explain. The second came in the form of a lingering glance at his phone, tension tightening his features before he slipped it back into his pocket. Ethan noticed but told himself not to overthink. After all, Damien was a cop. Secrets came with the job. But the third he couldn't ignore. It was late when Ethan decided to surprise Damien at the precinct. A quiet night meant Damien would likely be at his desk, sipping stale coffee and pretending exhaustion didn't wear on him. Ethan balanced 2 cups of espresso in a cardboard tray, excitement bubbling beneath his nerves. Then he saw him. Damien stood in the dimly lit parking lot, phone pressed to his ear, his body half-turned as if shielding himself from view. The sharp edge of his voice cut through the air, low but urgent. "You know you're the only one for me," Damien murmured, his free hand running through his hair. "You have to trust me." The words hit Ethan like a physical blow. His grip on the coffee tray faltered, the weight of betrayal settling in his chest like stone. He wanted to move, to confront, to demand answers, but his feet felt rooted to the pavement. Then Damien turned, catching sight of him. For a moment, everything froze. Their eyes met, Ethan's wide with disbelief, Damien's shadowed with something unreadable. Then, in a blink, his expression shifted into something careful, guarded. "Ethan," Damien said, his voice steady, but Ethan could hear the forced calm beneath it. Ethan swallowed hard. "Who was that?" Damien hesitated, a second too long. "No one important." A bitter laugh escaped Ethan. "Right? Just no one you call in the middle of the night, whispering promises to." Damien's jaw tightened. "It's not what you think." "Then tell me what it is." Ethan's voice rose, his chest heaving. "Because right now it looks a lot like you've been lying to me." A long silence stretched between them. Then Damien sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. "I didn't mean for this to happen." Ethan's stomach dropped. "For what to happen?" Damien exhaled sharply, shoulders slumping. "I'm engaged." The world blurred at the edges. Ethan blinked, as if his mind refused to register the words. "Engaged?" he echoed, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't want to hurt you," Damien continued, but the words felt hollow. Ethan stepped back, shaking his head. "You don't get to say that. You don't get to pretend this was ever real." Damien reached for him, but Ethan flinched. The touch that once felt safe now burned. Without another word, Ethan turned and walked away, the bitter taste of betrayal thick on his tongue. Ethan didn't remember getting home that night. The walk was a blur of neon lights and the sting of cold air against his skin. But nothing could numb the ache in his chest. He had trusted Damien. Let him in, believed in the quiet moments, the stolen touches, the unspoken promises. And all along it had been a lie. For days he let the weight of it press down on him. The city moved on around him, indifferent to his heartbreak. His coffee went cold before he could drink it. His writing turned to unfinished sentences and crossed-out paragraphs. Friends noticed, asked questions, but he had no answers to give. What was there to say? He had been reckless with his heart, and now he was paying the price. Then, one evening, something shifted. Ethan found himself back at the riverside, the same place where Damien had once stood beside him, where words had lingered in the air like half-kept promises. But this time, Damien wasn't there. It was just Ethan, the quiet rush of water, and the distant hum of the city behind him. He closed his eyes and let the memory play one last time, not to dwell, but to let go. Damien had made his choice. He had chosen silence over truth, hesitation over love. And Ethan? He refused to be someone's secret. Taking a slow breath, he pulled out his phone and typed a message. I hope you find what you're looking for, but I deserve more. Goodbye. He hovered over the send button for only a second before pressing it. A finality settled over him, heavy yet freeing. He didn't wait for a reply. He didn't need one. As he turned to leave, a stranger's voice broke the silence. Beautiful night, isn't it? Ethan glanced to his left. A man stood a few feet away, hands tucked into the pockets of a gray coat, watching the river with quiet admiration. Ethan offered a small nod. Yeah, I guess it is. The man smiled, genuine, open. First time here? Ethan hesitated, then shook his head. No, but it feels different tonight. The man studied him for a moment, then extended a hand. I'm Alex. Ethan looked at the outstretched hand, a flicker of warmth sparking in his chest. It was just a handshake, just an introduction. But it wasn't weighed down by secrets or hesitation. For the first time in weeks, Ethan smiled. He reached out, clasping Alex's hand in his own. I'm Ethan. The past was behind him. The future was unwritten. And for the first time in a long time, he was ready to turn the page.